That's a good start. That's a good start, isn't it?
Just
Welcome to your awakening. Please stay calm as your reality is adjusted.
Please stay calm as you hear the crackling and creaking of me putting my headphones back on. Because I'm doing this lo-fi. There's no fancy screen share here. I end up having to put my headphones in front of the speaker so the microphone picks up the audio from the video. It works. It does what I want. So you can hear the audio of that video clip, so it'll do. Welcome, folks. Greetings and well met. Find my screen, make sure that's muted. Yeah, get me pop-out chat going. Back once again with another episode of Sol Excalibre, the cat down the road that most people don't know about, but so many of those big rollers, the ones that, you know, vacuum up all the views and subscriptions, they know I'm here. They tune in occasionally and what could you call it? Poaching. They tune in and poach things and then don't give any credit where credit's due, and they won't help their own audience by pointing them in the direction of where they found what they're talking about. But anyway, yes, I'm digressing while I'm multitasking, so I'm filling up the airtime so you're not left listening to empty air, as they say. Hello to everyone in the chat room. Dave Iron, hello. And I know you guys are in the room, and Ridiculizer will be back in a bit. And lots of Tathro, hello. Everybody's struggling with your name recently, right? Dean Yates, hello, Dino. And Dots, the artist formerly known as a non-violent extremist. And Simon Boyle, hello. A new being, hello. And I'm sure people will turn up eventually from the Raconteurs News guys. They had been just broadcasting. I ended up having to just stop because we had to get this broadcast going because they were running over a little bit. That's the thing when you get people who talk a lot, and especially when you ask them to talk, and then people are surprised when they talk a lot and fill up all the airtime, and then you're running over time, and then they're looking at you going, "Oh, I've got to shut the broadcast down in a minute." Right? While I'm saying that, I'll further the invite to Jason. If he wants to join in, he's welcome to. And do that multitasking quicker, multitask quicker, because otherwise there's nothing going on. And you have to keep people's attention now, otherwise they go and do something else less boring instead. That, or it's just their very short attention span struggles to keep itself moving. And of course, there's always that dreaded fear of the emptiness of silence. Did you have that annoying meme going through your head then? Yeah, that lyrical refrain that you can't get out of your head that's just doing your boxing at the moment, something you heard on the radio or maybe even on the internet, and it's just like stuck in your head now, like meme warfare. Paul in the chat room, hello. And Helicopter Pad, hello. Yeah, why don't you turn off your television set and go out and do something less boring instead? Just something from UK childhood, even in like what, the 70s, 80s. I can't remember when that particular show was on. But it was one of the best shows on TV because right at the start it told you to just turn off your TV and go outside and play. It was one of the few TV shows back then that actually, you know, said something sensible. But anyway, let's not digress talking about reminiscing about TV shows from when I was a kid. It got me Notepad open, right. And got that right. Okay. One thing I wanted to mention, this is, well, one thing, a couple of things I need to mention. This is sort of housekeeping. I want to try and stay in the habit of doing this so that people hear at the beginning of the show some of the stuff that's been happening and maybe they should be aware of in terms of this channel, what I'm doing with the channel, etc. But whatever, I'll just say it, get on with it. I mentioned a few weeks ago that somebody had been playing around with an old email address of mine that is paul.cook1, used to be at virgin.net. And I said to people, if somebody sends you something using that address, don't mess with it, because there's probably something to do with phishing in there, because that looks like, well, that's what they've been trying to do. Basically, I don't have Virgin as an ISP anymore, so I don't use that email address anymore. But obviously, it's still around on the internet in some fashion. Somebody has spoofed it in some manner, and they're using it to try to do various things. I have, over recent weeks, since all this started, I've reported it multiple times in different ways. So it's gradually been reduced. The amount of use they can make out of it has been reduced. It's now listed on the spam house. Spam house, welcome to the spam house. You're on the list at the spam house. If you don't know what that is, it's like a blacklist of names that's spread around amongst all the ISPs. It's basically like a service for the internet providers, that they can have a list of all the addresses that are known to be associated with spam or other illicit activities online. So they add that to their own blacklists, and that means you try to use that address, it just get blocked or deleted. Somebody was trying to send in stuff around using that address. So if you open it, that's at your own risk. It's nothing to do with me. Somebody's trying to phish you, or they're trying to phish me, whatever, but they're messing around in that kind of sense. Because it's been somewhat closed down, the latest trick that they tried doing is they tried signing up to different websites, gaming websites, things like that. So then I'm getting messages from the website saying, oh, you've just opened this new account. Like, no, I haven't. So I warned them as well and whatever. So just be aware, somebody's still playing silly games. They're obviously not professionals. This is just somebody pissing about for whatever reason, probably a personal gripe, because there's various people out there that, people are people. Some people have decided they don't like me and they want to do something, so whatever it is they're doing, just be aware. If you get anything sent to you from that address, it's not me. I think I mentioned last week as well, I'm not on Twitter, I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on any other platform really. I've made use of Google Plus in recent years. I do have a Steam account. I do have accounts on those other platforms, but I don't make any use of them. They're there as backup if I need to make use of them in the future. And I will more than likely set up other such backup accounts just in case I need them. So if this gets shut down, I've got somewhere else I can utilize to get information out or get the word out online. So that's one sort of housekeeping thing that I wanted to mention. Be aware of that. The other one was, I was chatting with Jason last week, on Tuesday last week, on the Raconteurs News. I think he was, just wanting to have a chat with someone. It wasn't a pre-arranged thing. He sent me a message, I think the night before, just to come on and have a chat. So, they've got a show there with somebody talking about something. That's what I mentioned earlier. Somebody asks you to come along and talk, then you talk. And if you're good at filling up the air, as it were, which I am, that means I've filled up the air a lot. Other people made mention of, he talks too much. So, well, somebody asked me to talk, so I talked. If you want to get a chance to get a word in, just, get your word in. Let me know that you want to say something. But whatever, that's an aside. The main thing I wanted to mention was during my ranting and rambling while we were chatting last week, I mentioned Sarah Gellar. And I said, look at the connections between Sarah Gellar. This was in reference to Yaxley Lennon. And I've done this a few times recently. Classically, I misplaced an actress called Sarah Gellar for the person that actually meant, which was Pamela Gellar. So if you are interested in that thread of information, you don't want to be looking at Sarah Gellar. You want to be looking at Pamela Gellar. So yeah, just be aware of that if you go back and listen to that show. I know I've done this like with the Adam Curtis thing. I kept getting Adam Curry stuck in my head, and it was bloody annoying because I just kept seeing his stupid face every time I was trying to think of that subject. But that's the kind of level of the invasiveness of the propaganda out there, the mimetic, weaponized propaganda. The one recently, which I'll get talking with the lads about in a bit, that one about vaginas. Yeah, you might have heard it. That's the kind of thing I'm talking. That, you know, that's a pretty obvious and blunt weapon use of that kind of memetics effect here on the internet, on the social media platforms in particular. But you know, that's the kind of way as well, me mistaking an actress for the other person I was trying to reference. It's like I'm trying to remember the name of this person that I want to reference, and all I get stuck in my head is playing actors and actresses' names. You know, that's the invasive level of that kind of media, Hollywood propaganda. And that sort of adds into something I wanted to talk about tonight, because there's a common argument that's come up again recently in my perception. You know, you might not have seen this, but I think they are actively pushing it out there again, because it goes round in little cycles. They keep bringing it up again repeatedly. And I put in the subtitle this week, "Evolving Beyond the Argument?" ? Are you evolving? Are we evolving beyond the argument? And the statement or the question itself contains, you know, reference to what I'm talking about, like I often do with those kind of sentences. I put them together in such a way that they multiple layers of meaning and reference and whatever. Evolution is the argument. Have we evolved beyond that argument yet? If evolution is true, surely we should be able to be evolving beyond the argument. Yeah, but that's part of the argument as well, isn't it? You know, if you're arguing whether evolution even happens in the first place, then how can you evolve beyond the argument? Blah, 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 blah. It becomes ridiculous. And that's why I wanted to talk about it, because one of the main things that's constantly propagated with that argument, it's a deliberate misdirection, and it's a disguised attack on something that most people don't realize or don't make the connection to, maybe because they get caught up, they get quagmired, they get drawn into the mud of arguing whether evolution is true or not, and it becomes science versus religion, and that's what it's, you know, couched as. So yeah, I wanted to talk about it because I've seen that coming up, and then I'll mention a couple of other things when we get back to it. But yeah, let's get into that then. So I was just scanning my notes again to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything. This evolution argument that comes around again and again and again. You probably see it come up again and again and again. If you haven't seen it before, don't worry. You won't have to wait too long. It's only every few months or so, several months at the most. And this argument gets pushed around the media circles again, and it'll occasionally, maybe not every 6 months, maybe once a year, it will turn up in the mainstream media, and they'll have some academic or some experts arguing about whether it is or isn't, and whether it's a simulation, and all this kind of debate on the nature of reality and its relevance to the evolutionary question. Because evolution ties into so many other things to do with the contemporary propaganda narratives that are going on at the moment. Because if you can question that, then that leads you to that point of questioning the totality of the reality around you. Is it fake? Is it created? Or is it random chance of an accumulation of scientific models that equate to what we have now? And that is classically part of how they draw people in. That endless debate of, do you think it happened by, you know, Big Bang random chance theory, and it's all just, you know, it's taken so many billions and billions and billions of years, and now we've got to this point, and we all started out as a fish, and now we've developed to this point, and all that usual kind of scientific, or what we're told is the scientific perspective of evolution, compared to where we all just created several thousand years ago by some divine being that decided they wanted to make a plaything. He wanted a new toy to play with, a new ant farm to watch, to prod and watch and see what happens. That's what a lot of kids do with their ant farms. What happens if I stick a stick in this end? But that endless debate, and it is couched in this way that you are meant to decide. You're either a creationist or you're a scientist, a scientismist. You believe totally in that atheistic. Again, this is what they portray. I'm not saying this is what it actually is, or that this is what your decision, your ideas, your own point of view on it is, but this is the way it's portrayed in the media. This atheistic, total science point of view, completely empirical, materialistic conclusions of their arguments that, you start with this stuff here and you end up with this here. Or creationist. They want people to make that fight and get drawn into the arguments because there are a massive amount of details on either side of the argument. There's more details on the empirical side of the argument because part of what scientists do is they collect data and stack it up, so they've got big piles of data that they like to reference. And the creationist point of view is they point to only a few sources of reference material. But they claim that that's all you need. If you've got the Bible, you don't need anything else because everything's in the Bible. The details keep people arguing endlessly. And this subject, like I say, comes up cyclically. Every so many months, somebody or some media group out there will start pushing the same argument. If you believe in evolution, then you're one of those atheistic scientist people. You're the devil. You're the satanistic. And if you believe in the science, then you obviously don't believe in any kind of God or creator, and you must be totally, deluded in some fashion. And back and forth it goes on. And really, the actual argument that they're getting people involved in is nothing to do with the questions over the theory of evolution itself. Even in the book itself that most people like to point at, The Origin of Species, go and read it all the way through, including the appendices and whatever at the back. And in there, Darwin himself says, this is just a theory. I expect it to be altered over the course of time and to be possibly disputed or refuted. A theory. That's one of the other key things here that most people, the general public, are encouraged to forget about or ignore. You hear somebody say theory, and that means it's fact. Somebody says they have a new science theory, and everybody goes, "Oh, that's the way the universe works." Then they've figured it out. So no, it's a theory. You can't call it fact yet. It's not been proven enough to say that we know beyond doubt. In other words, that factual. That's one of the other things I wanted to mention: the fact of my ignorance, and that quote from Socrates. Somebody mentioned it last week, I think. I know nothing but the fact of my ignorance. And somebody, I think one of the chat rooms was suggesting that means it's moral relativism. What he's talking about is moral relativism. It's not. That's a misinterpretation of what he's saying. All he's saying is that the only fact I can know absolutely, in other words, I can be absolutely confident without doubt. That's what fact really means, without doubt at all, that I am ignorant of things. There's lots of stuff out there that I'm ignorant of. So I'm not arrogant enough to try and claim that I know the absolute fact about anything, because I'm still learning about those things. It doesn't mean nothing can be known, which is what moral relativism suggests. Nothing can be truly known because everything's relative to other things or itself. That's not what Socrates is saying. I only know the fact of my ignorance just means I know I'm ignorant of things. That I can use as a foundation to learn. If I'm ignorant of something, then it means there's things I can learn about. But anyway, slight sidestep. Knowing without doubt for a fact that this argument is one thing or another, but it's a theory. What is being referenced constantly is a theory. And Darwinian theory of evolution is just one version of a theory of evolution. There are other versions of the theory of evolution. I can't remember some of the names of the others, but other scientists and other, not even scientists, non-scientists have suggested other theories of how this reality seems to evolve and we seem to evolve. So it then becomes a question of semantics. What do you actually mean by the word evolution? And evolution simply means a progression from one thing, a transmutation during that progression from one thing to another. So it might start out as an apple, but it ends up as a lemon. It has evolved from one to the other. It's not saying that process is good or bad, negative, positive. It's just demonstrating a descriptor to say that this thing is transmuting from one to the other. It is evolving over a process of time. So you've got a lot of these common misconceptions or mistakes that are, in general, educated to most of the public, because the standard education that most people go through includes these common mistakes or misdirections deliberately, because it helps keep you dumbed down. If you've got a limited toolbox, there's only so many problems you can fix with that toolbox. So they deliberately give you a limited toolbox, and some of the tools in there are deliberately designed to go the wrong way, to not work properly, to cause more problems than they fix. So deliberate misdirections. Anyway, yeah, it's a theory. It's not a fact. It's not a proven fact. And theories change over time. That is the one thing about the scientific method that they can't corrupt or take away, because this is doable by anyone. Obviously, some experimentation requires certain equipment that's beyond people's expenses and whatever, but the point being, the actual act of doing the scientific method is available to anyone that can do shit. Yeah, anyone that can, enact in this physical reality is able to utilize the scientific method. And it just simply means make a hypothesis, create some experiments that test that hypothesis, look at the results of the tests, and then reassess your hypothesis based on the results of observation. And repeat until you refine your hypothesis such that the hypothesis is usually, in every test you can do, 99.9% of the time, it gives you the result that your hypothesis suggests. So it's accurate. It's a formula that can be used again and again and again. You know that every time you flick that light switch, the light comes on. That's theory into fact. I could get even more semantic and argue over fact in that respect as well. But my point in this sense is just to demonstrate that there are a lot of misconceptions and misdirections that get caught up into this constant argumentation over, are you an evolutionist or a creationist, etc. So they get people arguing this fashion over these details and these semantic mistakes within the argument itself. What do you mean by evolution? You're talking about biological evolution? Are you talking about psychological evolution? Are you talking about the evolution of the cosmos? Are you talking about the evolution of ideas? What exactly are you talking about? Oh, you're referencing the Darwinian theory of evolution. Right, okay, well, that's just one theory. Okay, put that on the table and see, you debunk that. Okay, well, what about the other theory and the other theory and the other theory? And at the same time, you all experience the linear process of time at the same time. Pardon the pun, not deliberate. But while you're having this argument, you all experience the linear process of time. You get one slice of that perception during your lifetime. You can prove to yourself, you can existentially prove that this reality continues on without your presence or interference. So therefore, you can have high confidence that after your lifetime, time will be continuing on for other people that are still alive. So, your slice, your view of the timeline is short. So certain things can be only revealed in longer spans of time that you can't see within your own lifetime. So if evolution is occurring, And if, as some theories suggest, it goes at this very slow process, you might not live long enough to see it actually happen during your lifetime. That's the point I'm trying to make. Yeah? You get a small slice. If some of the arguments that are suggested by the supposed experts, etc., are at least somewhat accurate, then their version of evolution takes a long time to happen. So the likelihood of you seeing it occur gets smaller and smaller. You've got to allow for the scale of numbers involved as well. With the number of species on the planet that can be observed, that raises the possibility of a evolutionary event being witnessed or being observable that can be data tracked, etc. But at the same time, there's a hell of a lot of us as well experiencing the process at the same time, the process of evolution and linear time. So how that affects the availability of that data chunk, the probabilities come down again. But really, I'm just dipping into a little bit. I'm just dabbling my toes in the water of that argument over evolution that goes on again and again and again. And if you're interested in that thread, that discussion, and a lot of that element of that argument, there's a hell of a lot of material out there you can go and wade through, and you can spend a lot of time. The argument isn't over yet, so basically leave your calendar open for the rest of your life to be arguing over it. And that's my point. That's an example of one of the ways, because they do it in different versions to suit different demographics, different cultures, etc. But it's one of the ways they give the general populace an argument that they know will not have a resolution, because they've deliberately included details and education levels that guarantee it will never be concluded. So it will just go on. It's argumentum ad infinitum, and it enables a divide and conquer methodology. You're either a creationist or you're an evolutionist, the scientism atheist, like I mentioned earlier. But hidden in this argument, I mentioned earlier as well, this misdirection, not just to do with the kind of logical fallacies or mistakes or presumptions, etc., but more to do with there is another purpose for this argument, not just divide and conquer, not just distraction. There is another hidden purpose in this argument. And I think, and I would suggest that the reason it comes back in a cyclical fashion into this social media environment and comes up again and again as a debate point between various people and groups out there is because it serves the agenda of certain people. So they want this topic constantly talked about, and they want that argument of, are you a creationist or an evolutionist, to be going on, because it serves their agenda in other ways. I feel, I'll try and describe what I'm thinking about here, what I'm trying to get across. The hidden argument inside there is one of authority. Because from the creationist point of view, they insist on, this is the common argument that you will encounter, and this is the common argument, this is the majority of most of the discussions that take place over this evolutionary argument. They come from a point of view that insists that the world is not as old as the scientists claim it is. The scientists claim it's billions of years old. This kind of creationism that is constantly pushed claims it's only several thousand years old. In other words, it's connected to the biblical history, the timeline of the biblical narrative that they claim gives them the authority. See, that's the hidden agenda here with this argument getting pushed again and again and again. Their purpose, I think, is to convince people subtly, subliminally, because it's hidden under this argument, to convince people that certain groups have a claim to authority on this planet, on this world, in this realm, because they can prove in their version of reality that the world is only several thousand years old, and it follows this timeline that is dictated in their holy books, their holy scripture. So if you accept that, that means you're automatically, tacitly accepting the authority of their God. So in other words, you give credence, you give justification to all their other claims of authority. You give justification to the claim of authority based on that one book alone. I know it's made up of multiple books, but those multiple books are presented as a singular volume, a singular work, the bibliography, the Bible. So that is a hidden narrative, a hidden propaganda manipulation going on there. They want people constantly arguing over this point because either you choose the opposition, which means they can use you as a perpetuation of the argumentation. Because if you go into that environment with the attitude of, no, I will absolutely prove my scientific point of view, I will refute these crazy religious people and prove to them that science is absolute truth and fact, blah, 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 blah. That creates the what they need, the Hegelian opposition, to keep the whole argument going. And you will never convince them because it's not about any truth. They don't give a shit about you showing them the truth. They don't give a shit if absolute factual truth has suddenly been revealed by some scientific experiment somewhere, and you can now share this with the world, and here you go, here's your truth to prove your evolutionary theory. They'll just ignore you. They'll just attempt to debunk you and then further the argument on in that constant debunking. So this is not about finding truth about how the world has developed, how this reality is developed, why are we this shape, why we've got two arms and blah, 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 the questions of evolution. It's nothing to do with figuring that out, really. All they want is for you to accept that the world is only a few thousand years old. And in doing so, if you accept that, that means you've just accepted the authority of their God, which means you've just accepted the authority of their church, of their holy scriptures, of all the things that are based on those works. In other words, the majority of how your society operates. The judiciary, the governmental systems, the monarchies, they're all based on that same premise. That's why they keep bringing this round again. Now, another thing that I wanted to point out with this argument, I mentioned when I was chatting with Jason that I try to look at things from a philosophical and psychological point of view. I think you need to use that balanced effect of the scientism and the more obtuse and artistic and spiritual elements of reality and of your own thinking and abilities. There's one other mistake that this argument relies on constantly. And it's down, again, I think, to just a general lack of education for a lot of people, but also in a limited way, their own lack of thinking. And that's down to the toolbox we've all get given when we're younger, that limited toolbox that is meant to create a little small allotment plot. You're not allowed to garden the entire planet. No, you just got to stay on this one little small allotment plot where you can only build a shed. You haven't got the ability to build a mansion, no, only a shed. But after getting too poetic on it to make the point, a common mistake is that this entire argument is a false dichotomy and it is based on a false premise. It's a false dichotomy claiming that you have to choose those one side or the other and only one can be right and argue amongst each other, Hegelian process, blah, blah, blah. So it's a false dichotomy. That's not really the discussion that is required to find out the truth of, does evolution take place, or are we in an environment that was created by some kind of creator being? The argument over evolution misdirects that and turns it into a false, or encapsulates that and turns it into a false dichotomy. But it's all based on a false premise, because the Godhead that the creationists claim to have created everything in their own works, in their own theology, and this is true for the big five. And you can leave Buddhism to one side, even though they claim they're not religious because they don't believe in a deity. They do in many ways, and they operate just like the other big four religions. So they are one of the big five. Yeah? But in all of them, the creator God is timeless. And the process of evolution requires time. So therefore, you cannot apply that question to the creator being, to the creator God. It's non-applicable, because the question of evolution in its equation requires the process of time. In the definition of the word itself, changes over time, evolving. It requires time. God is timeless. So it's a false premise to try and create an argument or to try and reason the equation that it either is God or it isn't. Because if evolution is existing, it operates within a process of time that God is outside of. So God doesn't care whether time is passing. To him, everything is all happening at the same time. So the very question of evolution in that creationist way it's presented is nonsensical. It's a non-argument based on a false premise. And that's why I say that the hidden agenda with that argument is not about the question of whether this was created or not, and if evolution occurs over whatever time scale. It's about, you must accept that the world is only so many thousand years old based on our claimed proof from our timeline of our accepted histories. Requires that acceptance. Creator God exists at every moment in time. He's here now, and he's here now, and he's here now. He's everywhere at once, all at once, everywhere, knows everything. So God knew what we would all look like now, and what we looked like 7,000 years ago, and what we looked like 70,000 years ago. So this very idea is just, it's nonsense. It goes nowhere. It's like, you can't really argue that way. That's why for a long time now I said, if people ask me, are you a creationist? And I said, well, yeah, I sort of am, because I'm not an atheist. So therefore, I think there is a creator God. It's just I don't accept this argument of, oh, well, that means you accept our version of the creator God. So no, the creator God didn't need to go, oh, make him this shape with arms and legs, make him look like us, is the actual quote in the text, or fashion him after us, after our image, plural. That's another side point of theological questioning. Why is he saying plural? Why is the singular Godhead using the plural? But anyway, I'll make him in my image. Well, didn't need to do that. God just needed to go word. And from that point on, he knew that the rest would grow from there. He knew what it would look like in 20 billion years' time, because he exists in 20 billion years' time, as well as existing in year zero. So this very idea of applying the concept of time and any process that requires time to that question of the creator is just a meaningless argument. That's why I wanted to mention that this week as one of those points, like I have been doing for years now, trying to look at things that commonly come up again as like stumbling points or hurdles that people fall over. Some of you would have heard me say this before because you've been around for a while, or we've talked about it before. But if you're new to this kind of stuff, these are common manipulations that are used again and again and again in this media environment. And some of the purposes is just to trip you up into constant arguments, because in many ways, the system benefits from your constant argumentation. There's loads of people out there who will sell you books about how you need to argue about something. There's loads of books available arguing for evolution and against evolution. There's a whole marketplace just in that sense. There's a whole industry built up around this idea of, well, if people argue, you can make a buck out of it when people are arguing. When two tribes go to war, all you can score is lots of money. There's an opportunity for many people in that way. But at the same time, it perpetuates many mistakes that are given to us in our younger education years. For most people, for most of the population, you get subjected to this low-level, restricted toolbox education that then leads to problems in later life. Because when presented with something like this, where two faces on either side of the screen are saying, oh, you got to join my group and say that it was a creator God. No, you got to join my group and say that it's evolution. And they want your energy on one side of their argument and the other. And it goes nowhere and achieves nothing. It doesn't get you the answers you're after. But that doesn't mean the answers are not out there. You know, if you're more aware of these kind of stumbling blocks that are deliberately perpetuated by the system because it enables all this bullshit and it hides other propaganda and manipulation narratives that they're trying to subtly push into your subconscious without you noticing, then you can become more aware of them. Then you do notice them and you can sidestep them. Yeah, but I was going to say, I call myself a creationist kind of thing because I do think there is a creator energy. Call it God, use the word loosely, because it's too easy to put our own ideas onto that, whatever it is. Yeah, we project onto it, we anthropomorphize it, we expect it to have human traits and human emotions, etc., etc. I don't think you can do that. But that doesn't mean it isn't something that causes the rest of this stuff to be available for us to experience. And that's a kind of Garden of Eden reality, which I think we're still in the Garden of Eden. We create the bullshit ourselves when we fall into the deception of thinking all of this is all that is. You know, some people think that that's occultic. You know, I was watching video earlier from another channel who's it's been funny over the years. I've watched him go from a empiricist, you know, the scientism side of the argument. He's gone all the way out and now he calls himself a reformed Christian, or he's returning to Christianity. And recently he's been making a lot of arguments about evolution, well, against evolution, basically. And I feel he's stuck on that argument of like, you're trying to claim authority for something just because some text, some history that's been written by other people claims that your God created everything a few thousand years ago. Talk about self-delusion, delusional. Yeah. I can't prove that there wasn't, but you can't prove that there was. So it's a moot point. Let's deal with what we can observe now and what we can figure out from that. It doesn't mean ignoring the non-visible, but it does mean, you know, taking into consideration that those histories and those structures that were built out of those written texts do not necessarily have any authority in reality. It's all projection and illusion and bullshittery. Anyway, connected somewhat to that. I do think this is connected. It might sound a bit obtuse to most people, but this is what you get when you look at a lot of different media streams and stuff that's going on. Sometimes I'm seeing connections that just might not make any sense to anybody else because, you know, I'm seeing bridges there where unless you're looking at loads of stuff, you might not see it. But recently there's been a campaign here in the UK, I think it's been in other countries as well, to get the school kids to come out on strike to protest about the global warming, the climate change, the green agenda. And this has all been built on the back of a recent appearance of one young girl at the UN. I know Gary's got some more to say on that, I'm sure, but she put out a little speech, a prepared speech about how everybody should be angry and you've got to do something about it now. We've only got 12 years left to save the world. Flash Gordon, I love you, but we've only got 12 years to save the planet. You know, all that kind of building up the emotional rhetoric and using a child to make an appeal to emotion to try and motivate the public to join in again with their climate change narrative and agenda. That the reason I say I see a connection with that is the other stuff that's going on in the yellow vest genre, call it that, because, you know, it's starting to spread in many different ways. And I don't know whether Yellow Vest covers it all now, because it's, I think, becoming more of a public movement rather than just being restricted to people who decide to put a yellow vest on. That has been still ongoing, and it's not gone away. It hasn't died off. It's still there. If anything, it's the same numbers, if not slightly increased. It's been building up slowly over time, which is, to me, another one of those indicators that a lot of this is organic, because it's only really the kind of fake movements that tend to be able to pull people en masse instantly overnight. You know, that kind of appearance of numbers doesn't happen that quickly in a natural way. Organically, it builds up over time. More and more people build up the courage and go, oh, yeah, these guys are right. I'm going to go in and support. I'm going to join in with what's going on. I'm going to participate in some way, because I've just had enough now. The wheel's grinding on me, and I can see that, you know, I've got to do something. I can no longer, you know, stay blinkered and hidden under the parapet and hope that I don't get kicked in the gonads. More and more people are thinking, yeah, this thing's still going. I want to join in with it. And I think some of this stuff to do with the re-emergence of the global warming agenda is deliberately trying to appropriate that energy that the Yellow Vest movement has been revealing. Yeah, and it's a good hook that the system uses often, is get the children to say it. You know, think about the children is one of those cliched phrases, but the point is really the system will use your own children against you. They will, absolutely. These people are ultimately despicable, so they'll do whatever it takes. So if that means programming your children to hate you and then getting them to use guilt against you to force you to do, they'll do that. They'll do that shit. Yeah, no problem. You know, just go and look up the clips about babies in incubators and the Iraq war. You'll see the kind of levels that people in supposed positions of power will go to utilize the youth, the children, against their own parents, against the older generation. So I just wanted to put that out there, you know, that this is off the back of the Yellow Vest uprising. Another mention that I think is all keyed into this as well, two actually, but it's all part of the same thing. The Ocasio-Cortez woman in America has been pumped up in the media deliberately, who's pushing a lot of these ideas as well. And there was the guy who's running for president that was on the Joe Rogan show the other night. He's like, I think Andy York or something like that. Andy Yang, I think. But if you listen to that interview he did with Rogan, he's talking a lot there about some of the suggested problem, reaction, solution, the suggested changes that they want to bring in, that's more towards a technocratic socialist structure. You know, even suggesting of giving $1,000 to everyone, no matter what, as long as they're a citizen, they get $1,000 automatically per month. You know, and some of these are good ideas that are being appropriated. Remember the Hegelian process, thesis, antithesis leads to the synthesis in the middle. So the actual direction they want to take us is that synthesis in the middle. And that synthesis between communism and capitalism, if you're utilizing the prism that they give to us of that left-right political paradigm, the synthesis in the middle is approximately socialism. So that's where they want the public to go. You know, I don't think these things are coincidental. The timing with all of this stuff, and I know, as Anne-Marie was talking about with Jason the other week, Jason and Paul, you know, the changes in many ways have been planned and encoded in some of the agendas for quite a while now. And it is revealing itself more and more now. So, you know, I'm glad the kids have got a lot of energy to want to do something about the shit that's going on in the world, but they're being deliberately misdirected to flail at the leaves on the tree and not address the root cause of the problem. And a lot of that root cause is hidden behind a red velvet curtain, and they're told that anything beyond that curtain is so horrific that it will destroy their mind if they look behind the curtain. You know, that denial barrier that we all have to work through that the people who run the world actually care about everybody else on the planet. They don't. When you're a young person, hopefully for a good majority of us, we grow up in an environment where the adults around us care for us. They look after us. They care about our well-being. They make sure we're fed and clothed and loved, etc. Yeah, like I say, for the majority of us, not true for everyone, but for most of us, we grow up in that environment, which means as you're psychologically developing and you're venturing out into the world as a teenager and you start building up your own social groups of friends, peer group, you have the same expectation of all the other people around you. If you've never experienced a malicious person while you're a child, then you will be naive to the ways of those malicious people when you go out into the world. I'm not suggesting that people should torment their kids just to teach them about nasty people, not at all. But there is a subtle subconscious layer in all of us that has that naivety, because we grow up in an environment where we are in general cared for. And then when you go into the big world, the bigger womb of the whole world, and you find out, well, there's a lot of people out there who don't give a shit about me, and some of them actually want to harm me. They want to take all my stuff and kill me. Yeah, getting past that denial barrier is something that is the progression from adolescence to adulthood, and should occur naturally for most people as they move out of the parental home and make their own way in life and experience a little bit and go, oh shit, yeah, there's some nasty gits out here, and you learn and you develop your thick skin, etc. But now the system is set up in such a way that they actively inculcate people into suspended adolescence, suspended adulthood, keep them as mental children. And mental children can't comprehend that their parent would want to harm them. For the child mind, they find it difficult to accept that the parent, the state, those who operate the machinery, want to do them harm. Imagine trying to get that across to a small kid that their own parent wants to hurt them. The child wouldn't believe it. Not at first. You might be able to force the point into them, kind of thing, but they wouldn't believe you at first. They'd be like, no, it can't be true. The denial barrier. So anyway, yeah, that about the yellow vest. And I think I've mentioned everything else that I wanted to mention. And I've been rambling for about an hour, so I'm going to shut up now. So join in whenever you want, guys. Thank you for letting me ramble for about an hour. Hopefully I made sense what I was ranting about, the evolution argument being a hidden agenda about authority and not really about evolution.
Yeah, also, I mean, they're polarizing the whole thing with the Christians getting back on the, because for a long time there were Christians who said, yes, evolution is all part of God's plan. So that involves a longer attention span for most people. Most people just can't imagine those sort of time lengths. One thing you said about God knowing everything that's going to be there in 20 billion years. I mean, to that I would say, which God? There is a God that is the universe, and then there's one perhaps that is the galaxy. I mean, when people talk about God, you got to ask the question: is there a God? Blah blah blah. But then, is there a higher intelligence above me that can take an interest in my own personal welfare? That's what people are asking when they say, "Is there a God?" But then they instantly, like trying to argue with a flat earther. Why do you believe that? They won't argue it. They'll go into the details instead of asking the honest question.
I was thinking about an analogy to address that point the other night, and synchronistically, probably just because I was thinking about this, and I think I've used this analogy before in some fashion, but to me, it's the equivalent of you being a cell, a little organic cell in your own kidney, say, another part of your body, and you're wondering what's going on up in the brain. And asking, does the brain care about me? Is there a big brain? I don't believe there's a big brain. If you look at it from that point of view, to me, I know that's, I think somebody mentioned it in the chat as well, pantheism. in a academic jargon fashion, yeah, but is the universe one big brain? Is God the brain of the universe, kind of thing? But to me, how that analogy helps comprehend, or at least try to comprehend, the scale of difference between what we think about and how we look at and interpret reality, and what this other thing might be.
But it
You know,
also,
it could be so far beyond us that we can't even begin to get our head around what it is. So,
it also contains hope, because even if that cell dies out, its soul, its DNA, will make another copy of itself.
yeah.
Now, if you've got the guts, you'll let that old DNA go into the bloodstream and try and travel up to the brain and become a brain cell instead, because the DNA can become a brain cell as well, can't it? So this sort of, that theory of the body contains the reincarnation idea as well, if you want to take it that way.
Well, can I just add? I think the way it's sort of way I see it, the way I've sort of looked at it, is I think we're evolving back to a sort of connection back to how the universe works. Just like understanding that just made me think of Nikola Tesla and his quote, which was saying, "The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence." So, that sort of refusal for science, mind you, saying that now it's getting more closer. Things are beginning to open up, but back in the day, yeah, there was that big separation between what's science, what you can see, taste, feel, touch. That's existing. We can measure that. We can quantify it. We can give it a name. We can do this, that, and the other. But with unseen energy, as we know exists, then that opens up again. This is where we're devolving through lack of sort of awareness about things, knowledge of self, all the rest of it. We're energy, the stuff that sort of is sort of not taught you. That's why when you grow to an adult, you're a confused mess most of the time, because you can't work out what the fuck is going on. But it's that, as I always say, that sort of evolving of the self is what Gary put in the chat as well. That's what it's about, and everything else then fits into it. But then this sort of overtaking of that, which is someone interestingly put in the chat about gene manipulation, as that evolve, is that's man interference. That's the third party coming in and manipulating something that's a natural progression in ourselves and our biology, how we are, our energy, our whole system, is all symbiotic with this planet, everything harmonizing with it. And as we grow and evolve, we'll then have the ability to be able to, like you say, go to the stars, know how the universe works. That's how I think that's the stuff they're trying to kind of, that's the knowledge they don't want you to have, because that will free you. I mean, it's like when you get into alignment in the right way as well, as you start doing basic things, as you say, just small steps to start off with. We're going pretty heavy and hard at the moment, but yeah, small steps. It's just like getting to know yourself, meditation, that sort of thing, balancing your energies out again, becoming like not angry and confused and frustrated with everything. And that's what they want you in a state of. So it's beginning to understand that bit, and then coming back to yourself, and then that radiates out, and then everything else. You don't want to sort of get angry when you sort of get into proper, you're on those sort of journey of truth, alignment, spirituality, whatever. Then as you get more into that, then all those anger things fall away. They should fall away. You shouldn't have those reactions. You shouldn't want to go and batter someone because they've just said something you didn't like, or this is the kind of society they've sort of got now. Everybody's at each other's throats. So once you move into those sorts of ways of thinking in that type of way, then it does get a bit easier. It's hard at first, obviously, because all things have to be, sorted out. Shit has to be cleansed. Mirrors have to be looked in. Dark, you have to look at yourself. It's not an easy path. So,
can I just make a connection to something Gary mentioned earlier?
Yeah.
Because it adds into what you were saying, links it together. Gary mentioned how previously to not so long ago, there were creationist versions of the theory of evolution. There was an acceptance that God was still all part of this process. Even Darwin himself was a devout Christian right up until his death. He never turned away from his faith just because he had these ideas of evolutionary process. But the connection I'm making here is one that is very much connected to the demographic that constant argument is directed at primarily. And they're the ones that the manipulators want to accept this certain timeline where the world begins several thousand years ago. I don't want to say the name, but I think hopefully you get who I'm suggesting, you know, the Middle East Red Sea pedestrians, because it justifies their claim to authority, like I was explaining earlier.
Yeah.
Whereas there's many theories and ideas going right back to, like through the Hindu and Buddhist traditions, ideas of evolutionary processes being just a part of the empirical reality that we experience. It's only in the last approximately 100 years that this idea of creationism beginning several thousand years ago has been put out there.
Yeah.
And what else started its push approximately 100 years ago? And it begins with a Z. Sorry, Jason. I'd seen that Jason put a question in the chat and I was wanting to try and address it. He asked if I'm a flat earther, does that negate all my opinions? It flattens your opinions.
I think the point you're missing here is that I think a lot of these Christian groups, I think a lot of them are controlled, and they've been told to push this creationist idea because they're heading for a lot more evolution in the form of transhumanism. And the only arguments against that will be religious moral arguments. Yeah. And so they're negating them now before they go ahead with the transhumanism thing. But that brings us on to the point what Pete was saying earlier on about, you know, you start out and you don't know anything. You're confused. Is that a state of pain? Yeah, that confusion, that ignorance.
Because, yeah.
Because Hinton, the guy that he did a lot of work on the fourth dimension, he was heavily Christian and into evolution. And he said the whole of evolution has been an escape from pain. And what people won't recognise now is they'll say, well, I'm not in pain. Yeah, well, you have to recognise that ignorance is a form of pain. And if people can start thinking, yeah, if I can move away from my ignorance, that is evolution. Yeah? But, you know, obviously, evolution and Christianity, no, they don't want they don't want that sensible middle path.
Yeah. Like I said before, they're devolving us, not evolving us.
Yeah.
To a certain degree. They want us held and taking us back.
Involving is the opposite.
Involve, yeah.
Yeah, turning inwards in sort
That's
of
the one.
Yeah.
But you mentioned time as well. So I thought, yeah, great, because patience, time and patience, and you know, the amount of people who just want a 5-minute fix, you know, and things of this nature. And that's the problem as well, because again, our awareness has been, you know, stunted, you know, or like you said before about education, you know, you put into a little, you know, box of knowledge, and then, you know, that's about it. You know, you might go to university and get a little bit more outside the box, but really that's about as far as it goes when it comes to real sort of looking at the, you know, like you say, they fed us this history, but you can see, I always go through archaeology and stuff, you can see still standing in the ground, and they can date back thousands of years. So there was something, and there's a culture and everything else that's you know, definitely for real. So everything else, you know, they try and fill in and, you know, mess up things with, you know, Egyptian sort of stuff, or, you know, all the, you know, timelines and stuff are all being constantly messed around with. And that's when, you know, you realize, you know, through just having your own awareness to look for other things. That's the thing. You've got to want to look and do these things and have that passion, if you like, or interest and curiosity in yourself to want to go and learn a bit more, and then spot the pitfalls. Because, you know, if you're at a certain level, you'll see them anyway. You know, the ones that are trying to drag you off down a certain avenue or to manipulate you in a certain way. You might not even see it right in front of your face, you know, at the time. You know, someone's there manipulating you. Someone's there pretending to have an agenda or be on board with something when they're not really. There's something else going on. That happens all the time. So people have to be aware of what they're, you know, digging around in and stuff like that. So it's about massive discernment, especially on the internet, you know. And you know, they're talking about it early on, actually, about the social media stuff on Raconteurs, about, you know, it is something that basically does, you know, affect pretty much everyone in the Western world, or probably on the planet, a lot of people, and it affects their moods, it affects their energy, their perceptions, what they think is good, what they think is bad. It caters directly for them. And we've seen that thing really, you know, take over the planet, really. That's been the paradigm shift in the last few years. You know, how we all do things, how we all are behaving now, how we're all self-policing our thoughts and our you know, before we say something, you know, that sort of thing. We've seen comedy getting destroyed. We've seen, you know, people just can't say anything because someone may be offended and may end up being arrested and not maybe end up in court, but, you know, just the inconvenience of the fact that that's, you know, going to mess up your life a little bit. You know, you can't even criticize anything or anybody. And the type of society they've created, that's killing the energy. That's devolving us. That's not making good human beings anymore. They just want to make, you know, this, I think, just one gender, fuse them both together and squash them in and go, that's it. Now you're completely fucked. You know, you will now officially be dying out in the next 50 to 80 to 100 years, you know.
That could connect back into the utilising the youth against the parents and the recent, I think we were looking at it earlier, that meme weapon. Yeah, I mean, I think I might have mentioned it at the beginning, but without showing any clips of it or whatever, because I don't want to give them the opportunity to hit me with copyright strikes or some shit. But that vagina song that was pushed around just before Valentine's Day, where it was a day or two before what they call Galentine's Day. Yeah, I don't know. Jeff C talked a bit about this. He put up a few videos about it, basically, but that kind of mimetic warfare, utilizing the social media platforms, which have been wholeheartedly adopted by the majority of the youth because they don't know the world without them. So to them, it's just another part of their body. It's a new sense of perception that they need with them constantly. And that is being manipulated to create the kind of effects like talking about, getting people distracted from themselves and using that energy to fuel these various narratives that got going on, like the climate change one with all the kids. I'll mention that as well because I listened to what's his name, Gannon or Grannon, the Spartan life coach guy. He did a little interview podcast thing with you know, Ike's son. It does that non-binary elephant podcast, I think it's called. And I dip into that stuff every now and then. Some to do with the David Icke podcast thing that he does. I tune into him every now and then to see what they're talking about and what the topic is and blah. But listening to them talking about social media, the Spartan life coach guy, I can't remember his proper name. I think it's Steve Grannon, I think. Not so long ago, they did a new documentary all about how social media is bad for you. I was sat there, I was listening to him talking about it, and I was thinking, like, mate, we told you this. We told you this several years ago. And that, to me, it just smelled of damage control. It's like now that more and more of the people who actually work in the system have come out as whistleblowers, saying, yeah, we were deliberately using tactics to hook people in psychologically, to turn them into junkies, basically, to make them chemically addicted to what we were doing and to mess with their lives socially. And all of that is keyed to the manipulation to push people, you know, to herd people and whatever. And he's talking about that, and I'm just thinking, oh, mate, okay, so now that all these whistleblowers and other factual evidence has come out, now you decide to do a documentary and say to it, hey, everyone, social media is bad for you. And it's like, some of us have been saying this now for several years. And to me, it sort of demonstrates, like I say, damage control, because you've not really sort of put this point across before. You've only decided to do it now. And is this an attempt to redirect people now that more of this evidence is coming forward and more people have gnosis of what we're talking about when we say, like, how social media can be used to hook people and drive them and shit? Yeah, now it's becoming obvious. The system has to come in and damage control and take that new awareness and re-steer it into a new limited hangout somewhere. So been saying it for fucking years, and social media is caustic. It destroys communication. It doesn't improve it. It doesn't evolve it. There's a way to connect it to our, the original point. It doesn't evolve communication. It adds more possibilities of communication, because you potentially can connect to anyone else on the planet who's got access to the internet. But overall, the effect on your societies is that it destroys communication. It separates people.
It's a revolving role. Put R in front of evolve. Revolution. It's not to revolve, is it? It's to evolve.
Yeah. And in terms of the perception thing as well, I've put it in the Raconteurs news chat earlier while I was listening to the guys chatting on there. The element of the way they manipulate people's perception and encourage them to live their life in a vicarious virtual incarnation. In other words, their avatar online becomes more real to them than their own lives. Then that is drawing that ego self forward and convincing it that it is more important than the real self, which is why these, and I'm saying it's all young people, it's not just young people, but it's affecting the demographic of the young people because they have adopted it more than the older generation. Yeah, so they're feeling the effects more. There's more people suffering the effects because there's statistically more people utilizing the technology, etc. So they're, bringing forth all these problems like depression and anxiety and various other self-image effects, body dysmorphia and stuff like that, anorexia, etc., etc. That's that, like I say, the drawing out of the ego self and then convincing it that it's the thing that's real. And that means people are further and further away from their real self. Like you mentioned earlier, yeah? Devolving people by drawing them away from their real self.
Yeah.
But when you mentioned the older people, it happens to them as well. An older person is much more likely at some point to sit at that keyboard and say to themselves, "I'm just pretending," yeah. Which is what the internet is, isn't it? You're just pretending, not completely, because that's the whole point. Most of the time is spent pretending, and you become so hooked up in it that then you begin projecting your real self, and that's the one that gets hurt in the case of kids. But an adult is more likely to say, "Well, why did I let myself go and get that far?"
But I know quite a few older people though who they fall into the same mindset, but for them in their generation, that it's more like keeping up with the Joneses. So they don't realise necessarily consciously, like you're suggesting, they don't realise that they're getting hooked into a pretense. But the way they are online is more like what we used to attribute to the keeping up with the Joneses effect, yeah? So they'll post loads of pictures of themselves when they're having fun and a good time and all that lot, but they don't post the pictures of themselves when they're miserable and upset and stuff like that. Yeah? So they're living a pretense. They're putting up a public appearance, an image. That's what I put in the chat. It's all about the image, which is, in a way, it's the same kind of psychology as schizophrenia. You think the image is real. Not your real self, not your actual self. No, you've fallen into this belief that the image that you're projecting is the real thing. It's not. The system plays on that, which is why they've tried over the years to deliberately exacerbate that element of schizophrenia in the public consciousness. They want people to be what would be classified as schizophrenic.
It's the digital straw man.
Yeah.
And again, taking you away from yourself, taking you away from, doing that, like I say, that work on yourself, looking in the mirror stuff, all the rest of it. And the fake stuff, we talked about AI faking stuff just before we came on, how that's now being used to sort of manipulate they rolled out the story last year, Cambridge Analytica, all the Facebook stuff, telling you, that they do this sort of thing. They haven't stopped doing it. They just use other ways or the companies and whatever. It's just been, it's almost like manufacturing consent, isn't it? So, nobody really reacts to that. Everybody carries on using it. There's no massive drop in social media use. People are still signing up like there's no tomorrow. So that to them is, okay, move to the next step. And this is what they're doing with all the smartphone technologies and all the biometric stuff that they're now incorporating in all the latest phones and handsets and stuff like that. So, you know, it's all being ramped up. It's all being normalized into society. So, you know, we all have a biometric, you know, ID. You know, there's no need for a chip, even, is there? But some people are still getting chipped. But that's, you know, that's still happening as well. But you know, there's the, you know, the majority of us will, you know, are buying up. Are buying into this technology in such a huge scale now. You know, and it's, you know.
I was going to say it's evolved beyond the chip, but I think they were very aware from the beginning of all these manipulations. They knew that most people would not want, not initially anyway, would not want an implant. So I think they'd already planned all along that they would set up this situation where people would be holding the device rather than the device being implanted to them. They're carrying it around willingly. You know, so.
And to take the internet wherever you go, that constant loop is always there. You know, if you need, if that's what you want to do with it.
That's why I started to see it as being like an extra sense. The way people have picked it up and sort of carried it with them, it's become that extra sense where that leads to that effect where people feel like if they don't have access to it, there's something missing. It's like they've lost a limb. Yeah, it's like phantom limb syndrome. If my phone's not there, I've got this itch that I've got to keep touching it because it's not there. Yeah?
Do you not think though it's causing that much trauma as well? People are seeing the negative effects now in real time, you know, the reality of it. You know, this is what it does to people.
The case that the guys mentioned on Raconteurs News, you know, that young girl that supposedly killed herself. I'm only saying supposedly because I don't know the details or the truth of the matter or whatever, but supposedly killed herself because she wasn't allowed to use her phone. You know, if you take that as true, if that did actually happen, I would suggest that there's probably a hell of a lot more effect or causes involved in that. It wasn't just a singular event. It wasn't like she was a perfectly happy child. You can't use your phone today. Oh my God, end of the world, kill myself. I doubt that. There's probably a lead up of other causes that led to her being that depressed if she took.
And there's loads of stories of kids killing themselves, being bullied or harassed using social media. You know,
I think it's interesting, Pete, you mentioned earlier on about looking at these old archaeological sites and that. And I mean, you got to go back. And the short attention span, I think that is a pretty recent thing. Yeah, because you go back to the time when I was making those stones. What would a day be like? I mean, it's just endless. The moments are endless. Nothing going on a hell of a lot of the time. Yeah?
Maybe there was. Maybe there was loads going on. It's like
a certain amount, but you know.
Full on high energy, divine energy party going on, and they're moving them stones just by looking at them. I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, just for hundreds of years. I mean, you know, people ploughing, people going to jobs that are boring, and you know that's why they go to a church on a Sunday and liven things up. You know, you've got the statues and the windows and all the rest. But you know, a short attention span, I don't think was really a problem before, pretty recently, before mechanisation probably, because even the you know, the apprentices working for somebody, that was a slow job, yeah? I mean, Dickens describes it, yeah? Describes it. There's loads of young characters in his books, like apprentices that are just leaning against the door all day, you know, and they're bored.
I think it could be an evidence or an example of evidence to suggest an epigenetic development of people's psychology. In the same way, like, you know, I know it's a bit of a cheesy example to use, but an alligator will grow to the size of its environment. So if you keep it in a small tank, it will stay small. If you put it in a big tank, it gets bigger. So in this, as the technology has developed, you know, this is not just totally contemporary to do with modern smart technology. This is true of the television age and of the print age, you know, when they first started mass printing media, books, entertainment books and whatever. They're giving people smaller and smaller chunks. People are getting a sense of satisfaction from a smaller and smaller chunk. So the feedback loop of the dopamine sensation has been refined. Its efficiency has been evolved to such a degree that now they can put up a 5-second meme or just a static meme image. People get a sense of that satisfaction as if they've digested what they needed to feel complete. So that has led to their own thinking only ever growing so big that, say, for example, all I want is a 5-second clip. I don't want to have to sit for an hour until somebody gets to a conclusion. No, give it me in 5 seconds.
So if we take rational thought and spirit out of the human brain, what we have is an apparatus for receiving information and processing it. And what you're saying is, you start feeding in more and more information, it's going to start processing faster and faster.
Yeah, but each chunk of information is smaller and smaller and smaller.
Well, yeah, there's still overall there is more information coming in.
Yeah.
Even if it's in small bits.
But it would convince the system that all it can now deal with, the system would adapt to dealing with small chunks in rapid succession. Yeah, it's like somebody firing pellets into your gob. You know, you'd be digesting really quick in small chunks, but constantly. That's what the social media is doing to people.
But like I said, the brain it processes facts into knowledge, and then knowledge into wisdom. That's how it should work, and it's still roughly gonna follow that same pattern. So all this fast fire information, at some point, people are gonna start putting it all together, and at that point, they're gonna have to double process, and they're gonna have to chuck out all the fake news. You know, because it can't be relied on. It can't properly be connected to anything else. Yeah. Unless they find the big agenda, so they will pick out all the little bits of truth and start putting them together.
Yeah, I think that's where we are now.
Yeah. So,
for a lot of people, anyway, not everyone. You know, not the majority of the public. They still seem to be catching up, but I think the effect, the oversaturation is happening now. I think that's why, again, I reference that Adam Curtis movie, the hypernormalization. I mean, that's why they're pushing this environment to be that structure of insecurity, where unless something has some kind of official stamp on it, you just don't know whether it's true or false. You can't tell the difference, and you can't get any sense of foundation or conclusion to your query or your problems that you're trying to figure. No, it's just a massive confusion with little chunks of emotional state.
Because the amount of truth in something is the only true measure of its quality.
Yeah.
And people are starting to look for that. So they've got to deny all truth.
Yeah.
If they can.
Hence fake news.
And they put the green little tick mark on the approved sites now on some of your browsers. I'm not sure.
I've got a little green tick stuck next to my name on the YouTube.
I bet Snopes has got one. I saw somebody on Twitter the other day trying to back up an argument with a page from Snopes. I thought, oh God.
Did you tell them just move the 2 S's aside and look again? What's it say? Nope. That's the two, the 2 S's. Is the weird guy and the crazy cat lady. Just move them out of the way. Look at the information. Nope. Sorry, being terribly biased and judgmental.
But anyway, we've got to be patient because there's lots of time, and yes,
that's the thing. Perception of time, isn't it? Are we going to get there yet? Sorry, I was just scrolling back.
I think some of us are. I think the ancient knowledge or the ancient technologies and stuff, and that sort of stuff they've discovered. Again, people like Klaus Donner and people who've done talks and have got photographs of all these artifacts and seen things, and that are just hidden away from public consumption. Just the things that you'd blow your mind. You talk about Darwin and all that stuff. It just it goes back millions of years. Some stuff that they've found, and so there's all that as well. So ancient knowledge being hidden or hidden away and then called occulted, or you're called into the hidden knowledge. Basically, that's stuff that they always try and like I say, do their best to keep people away from asking questions or just finding out about themselves. And then they've got all of the shop front window to capture everybody, to sell them whatever it is they need to, and that's where the new age comes in. The new age spiritual bullshit stuff comes in, and people get all high and, floaty and don't never come off the clouds and stay up there, and, they're no use to anybody, and end up some of them get sections, it's like, it's like, come back down, please, it's
all those new age fairies. But if they've all floated off up in the clouds, does that mean whenever it rains, that's them pissing on us?
But that's how they do it. It's like I say, they get good people. What annoys me the most about it is the good people out there, and because they're looking and there's this information, because it's being denied you pretty much, like I say, from your childhood, when we should be learning about ourselves, and the education needs to be all changed and everything else. But once we get to an age, we're adult, we are naive in this information, we are, and there are those people who will come along and completely ruin your fucking life, so that's where I say discernment and everything else, and everything you're doing in this sort of field or whatever, because there's a lot of people out there who will just, literally take everything, including your slippers, but they don't give a fuck, so
I ain't got any slippers.
But,
they can have me knackered out socks if they want them. I've got some old thermal socks which have got they're extra holy. They're saintly socks.
But I'm laughing about it, but I'm serious. There is that element to it, and I'd always say, just be aware and use your own discernment.
Do you think that? Well, judging by the yellow vest stuff that, like I said, is still going on. It's not exactly gone away. They might not be showing it to us. I noticed this week that there was even less coverage, even from the supposed alternative news and whatever. There was less coverage of what was going on.
Yeah, RT still put a feed out on Saturday. I did see that.
Yeah, but that was one of hardly a few compared to what, because it wasn't just them showing it before, whereas now it seems like they're the only ones that are still regularly going and, videoing what's happening.
Yeah.
Sputnik as well.
Sorry, say again.
Sputnik. There's a channel called Sputnik.
You mean the Russian Sputnik, or is it part of RT?
I don't know what it is. It might be a part of RT. It's called Sputnik.
Sputnik is an old media outlet in Russia from before the end of the Soviet Union, and it was a propaganda mouthpiece for the state.
Well, it's a YouTube channel as well, so maybe.
I have come across it, yeah.
Yeah, it's among memes and, people being programmed. I mean, my mother, I'm not, no disparagement, but she wouldn't be able to work out a lot of the things that we're talking about. But when I asked her once, I was about 7 years old, about evolution, she just said something that a teacher had told her and she'd remembered. So people do remember things. And she says, things change for the better. Which I think is a good summing up of evolution. Yeah.
Well, it's optimistic at least, yeah.
Well, yeah. Later on, you take it in a way that things will only change if they have a better option. That's
but
evolution. Anything else is.
I don't know. Even Darwin himself questioned his survival of the fittest kind of element of his own theory. But was it good? Was it good fortune for the dodo to evolve into a really big, fat, flightless state, such that when a new predator turned up, they were easy prey?
How many millions of years were they living on the fat of the land? Yeah, I mean, taking it really easy before people came along.
But I suppose I'm answering my own question. Maybe our evolution has got us to a point where we can hopefully be able to adapt to a change like that. And if a new predator turns up, we can adapt to survive.
And we're evolving to see through all the bullshit that's going on right now. And that's what I think is important. Yeah, that's the other thing in your head, the mind evolving,
That's sort of what I was with the yellow vest thing. That was what I was trying to ask you.
Ultimately, I've got to go in a second. Ultimately, evolution is going to evolve because the only thing that can keep you in contact with the moment is your instinctive animal self. So the mind has to rule the body, judged by the heart will bring you, consciousness. Yeah? because the only thing that can keep up with the moment by moment time is your instinct. But your instinct isn't by nature conscious. It doesn't have that kind of level of intelligence that you need to say you're evolved. So, you know, it's almost like evolution came for a track and it said, oh, we ought to go this way. No, we need emotion. No, we need intelligence. Oh, let's try and do it all three at the same time. People are not properly put together yet. You know, they've got to put themselves together to evolve.
Don't worry, the gender agenda will save them.
Once you put together those three centres, you know, you're talking about a very
that's where you have
being.
that's where you start when they're young, then, isn't it? When they're children, when they're kids, you teach them the good stuff about themselves, and then they'll put that together, and then that changes things. They get older, and within a generation or so, we've got a half decent planet to live on. You know.
Yeah. Good night, Gary.
Oh, cheers, Gary. See you later. But yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? If we don't do any of these things, then it just carries on the same models of education, the same systems, the same structures set up, and that's what we talk about, isn't it? They're all upside down, wrong, inverted, and just to create chaos and madness, and break you down as a human, as a soul, as a spirit, breaking you down, chipping away at us. Certain people fall by the wayside, others have to stand up and still keep going and whatever, but it's harsh. They've not made it easy. Whatever area of the planet you're born on, much harsher in other ones. We've just got more of a economic slavery, economic, stress, a lot of stress in the West, huge amount of illnesses and people suffering from that, and that's always, that's the big weapon they use, I think. Again, you're on your emotional states constantly with the news stories, changing people's emotions, it seems at will these days. And doing crazy things like Brexit just to fire up it even more. It's, you see how it's all planned out, how it all sort of manipulates us as a people.
Failing at Brexit,
failing miserably,
deliberately failing at Brexit, so that people get more and more stressed out and agitated.
Yeah,
as the situation has rolled on.
Yeah.
Definitely, that again. I was thinking it's a terribly cliched cliche. But the children are the future. That's just the reality of the process of time, linear time.
That is the reality, yes.
So what is presented to them and how they are educated and the kind of things that they're told about, etc., and what their perception takes in and how well they process that information. All of those things are the most important thing compared to everything else.
Yeah, and like I said before,
obviously having children in the first place,
and like I say,
that's probably really the key crux of the whole thing. You've got to be having children in the first place.
And we come across it, like I say, that when we're adults, if you like, being able to sort of, have our own thoughts. I mean, through school, I know most of us wouldn't have a great sort of time in school. I think most free-thinking people, or people who, just basically don't like being told what to do and all the rest of it, have a struggle as kids in school or whatever, or they just have a miserable time because they have to put up with it, that sort of thing. So no one enjoys it, I think, who is thinking, this is in, and I think that's maybe, I don't know, kids these days, is there half the classes like that? I don't know. Are people thinking, kids thinking that way that I used to think when you come through the system?
Even more so now, because and this is part of the feedback loop effect, because of the stuff they've got access to via the internet.
Yeah.
So if anything, and I know some people who are teachers or have been teachers, and I'm not trying to suggest that all teachers are bad and they're all working for the man, they're all evil. It's a generalization, but they're getting it worse now, I think, than they probably maybe ever have been, maybe not. There's certain times in history where the youth have been quite rambunctious, but certainly now they have a much harder job to keep the attention of the students and actually direct it in the way that they want. But if anything, that feedback loop effect has fueled a lot of that kind of I call it Tavistock manipulation. So it's developed into techniques that means they're better at doing it. So the psychological manipulation techniques are better than they were, say, 20, 30 years ago. So even though the teachers are in a harder position of trying to convince these kids who've got access to the internet, you can, teacher says something, and they can sit there and go look it up on some site and go, oh, he's talking bullshit.
Yeah.
So they've got that harder, but they've got more tools available to them to actually mold the children's thinking. The very social media that the children are using to try and argue with the teacher is molding their thinking.
It's putting them in a box, and they don't see that either. Yeah, exactly.
So when the games on the internet replace the teacher at the front of a class, which they will, gaming will become the way children are educated. And I don't mean, what most people perceive as gaming now, where somebody sat there with a console, with the thumb button flicking away and whatever. Education will be gamified. And eventually that will develop to the point where, in effect, a game is how your children are educated. But it won't be playing with each other out in the world, climbing trees and running around fields and whatever. No, it'll be headsets or some kind of connection that is virtual.
Yeah. And
they will be playing a game in a virtual world, and through the play of the game, they are given the propaganda. They're told the double plus good indoctrination system.
Well, we mentioned, mentioned the very story about that not that long ago. If you remember, they were talking about doing that. I think it was in Wales, actually, the Welsh education system.
If you look at some of the technology that's available out there now already, commercially available, if anything, some of it is quite well established. Some of the little toy ranges that are smart devices made deliberately for children. So they're not like a full-blown tablet that an adult would buy, to use as a tablet device or laptop or whatever. They're sort of reduced functionality, but they're geared to the child's desires, so they're colourful, they're made out of chunky plastic, they've got limited software on them, so they can do a certain amount of stuff, but it's not like a computer or even a smartphone. It's close to, but the software is designed to be a controlled, limited operating system.
Yeah.
So in effect, it's like corporate education for your children. And it's presented in such a way as these things are educational toys, but you have to sit and have a look through them to see what kind of education they're talking about. And when we've got this current contemporary paradigm of messing with kids' heads such that they don't know what their self is, they've got no concept of that, they don't even know what gender they are, they don't know what tribe they belong to, what reality is, whether it's all illusion or not. So much stuff to fuck with their thinking.
Yeah.
And that is now being introduced at an earlier and earlier age by these kind of devices that are presented to the parents as toys, educational toys.
Yeah. And there was a story about a child who couldn't go to school because he wasn't very well. And he in case he picked up some sort of germs or bugs in the class because he had leukemia or something. So they sent a robot into school, a little sort of desktop thing, and his laptop was hooked up to that at home. So he was being taught from home by this little machine, which was like an Alexa, I'd say, just picking up the voice. And
what they call a remote presence.
Yeah, yeah. And he was... he could interact with the class as well, and people in the class too, other ones there. What I was thinking in the future, though, where there'll just be about 20 of these little robots with no pupils, and they're all at home, all being taught by a single holographic teacher that would just, maybe not even that, just somebody there who's just doing the
AI, a virtualized AI education system.
That's it, and that's how I think that's running into the sort of next generation or two ahead, not that far away.
In the same way as with the healthcare environment, I was talking about with Jace the other night, in many ways, a lot of the new developments are going to be immensely beneficial. They're going to be fantastic for us. Like, prosthetic limbs that can connect to your thinking so that you can control it as if it was a normal limb.
Yeah.
Education systems like this that could be immensely useful because you would no longer require the infrastructure of school buildings, academic buildings, all the infrastructures of the actual education system that teaches teachers to teach others. Yeah. A lot of that could all be reduced immensely. So it would reduce governmental costs. It would make potentially education available to more people. Things like that, immensely beneficial. But that's the foot in the door. Yeah, that's the foot in the door that then gives them the infrastructure required to increase the indoctrination to the nth degree. You think the indoctrination's bad enough now where you have to send your kids to this place that's the equivalent of a prison where they get locked inside for several hours a day and they're indoctrinated with this politically correct bullshit that's, I could rant about that, whatever. I know people know what I mean, yeah? It's going to be exactly the same whether the kid is sat in his bedroom with some kind of device that is a connection to a virtual classroom. They're going to be even more subjected to propaganda then.
Yeah.
And the propaganda will get to a stage where the learning feedback loop of these AI systems, I use the word AI loosely because I'm not talking about a sentient electronic thing. These are just learning systems, neural network learning systems. They will learn what works best for every individual child, every student. And in doing so, they will be better at presenting the indoctrination and the propaganda into that child's mind.
In a much more efficient way.
Yeah. So it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy that will wind tighter and tighter and tighter. And I know people think that me saying this kind of stuff is like doom porn, techno doom porn, he's just a Luddite and all that kind of. Just fucking use your brain and think about shit and look at the evidence that's available to you now. It doesn't take that much fucking mental effort to see this progression that we've gone along.
And
if you think it's bad now where kids are killing themselves because they can't access their phone, imagine what it's going to be like in another 10 years when all those kids have been indoctrinated in their rooms, in their cubicles, with their only perception of reality is through a screen that's controlled by some authority figure. Just fucking use your brain, for fuck's sake. It doesn't take a lot of figuring out of what the world's going to be like if we get to that stage. It's going to be shit piled on top of shit.
Yes.
And again, I'll know reference him a lot. I mentioned I just said it in the chat early on the raconteurs. And sometimes you got to laugh because if you don't, you'll just go fucking crazy.
Absolutely.
Some of the just willful ignorance of people who are running headlong with this shit when you can clearly see the cliff edge in front of them. You talk about knowledge, know where the ledge is. Yeah, you keep running that direction, mate. Bye. It's been nice to know you. I'm not going to bother turning up for your funeral. I'll send my remote presence, and the AI can write a eulogy for you. I can't be asked. Yeah, it will get that way. No, it wouldn't surprise me if there isn't companies already out there offering this, and I'll claim the copyright to this in case somebody tries to plagiarize me. But you could use an AI system to write a eulogy for somebody based on their social media footprint.
Yeah.
So you'd never need to have anyone at your fucking funeral. A computer could write the eulogy for you. An automated fucking Hawkins voice box could speak it out at the funeral. You'd robotically get put into the crematorium, but job done. No people required.
It'd be like when they were at was it in Japan, when they go to football matches, they can have replacement, not you turn up, you can have a bot sitting in a chair, which you control from your home, and it can do things, and it's just completely a waste of time. But yeah, it's yeah, that's the sort of world it seems that they want to take it, or it's you can't be bothered, because that's how they got people can't be asked. Like that film where he send out his surrogate, and they just stay at home all day. The surrogate goes out, does the job, and sorts it out, and you just don't have to bother. But yeah, it seems to be that's the sort of human being manipulated into that lazy, being carried around like in that film Wall-E when they're on hoverboards, aren't they? Because they've lost the use of their legs.
Yeah.
So it's.
When I'm much older, I'm going to look forward to this, and I'm going to make extra effort to do a really big poo on that robot's hands when he's wiping my bum. I say, "Oh, robot, get over here. I've done poopies. I need you to wipe your bum again." "Oh, right. Get it right into the joints of his fingers." "Yeah, there you go." Thank heavens for the robots. The robots will save us. Sorry, I know I'm just being silly now. It's probably just time to wind it up. It's got to the silly stage.
Well, you actually have to have a laugh as well. You got to have and some of the stuff we see, we have.
That was why I was mentioning it, because it's when you're trying to work your way through a lot of this shit, when you do this kind of thing, whether you put in content out or not, but if you spend your own time by choice, looking at stuff because you want to find out what's going on, or you're looking for answers to questions or whatever, it does become like a work. You are working, dealing with, to sift through all this shit that's presented to you all the time. We can tell you some of the examples of shit that gets pumped out by the media, but that's just like 1% of the shit that we've seen, so that we can go, "Oh, look at that bit there. That's worth mentioning. That's worth talking about." Out of 100 hours of media fucking shite output, you might get 10 hours worth of stuff that you could show people, or reference or whatever. So if you don't laugh, it gets insane making.
And the things they do to us, the dumbing down process through advertising, and the stuff that how they talk to you, that's the funny thing, on TV, the news presenters, or especially some of the crazy ones that look like they're sort of I don't know, like they're shifting or something. There's some weird shit going on. It doesn't compute. The Mancunian candidate is like sort of not working this time, and they have a bit of a meltdown.
Have you caught a dose of Ikism? I keep seeing lizards everywhere. "Oh, I'm feeling a bit Ikean today. Oh, yeah, lizard."
Yeah.
So, like I said, I'm going to say a quick hello to everyone in the chat. I'm being way too silly, so I'm going to do that, and then we'll be closing off. So, hello. I said hello to some people at the beginning. I'm scrolling back up. Uni Black Sister, hello, mate. It was good to hear you chatting with the other guys, because it's good to hear different points of view, and especially from somebody that's like much younger than me. It's good to listen to what other younger people are saying about a lot of this shit. That's why I'm optimistic, because I know that there's people out there that they don't buy all the bullshit. So there is hope. There is always hope. I'm scrolling down. Sorry. Cherish Rosin, hello. And Helicopter Pad, hello. And Patrick Nee, hello. If I said hello to you already, don't worry about it. It's just extra. Webeto. It's Paul Webeto from Raconteurs News. Hello. I hope you and Jason weren't bored. If that's why you left, because or maybe it was me talking too much again. They got bored and decided they'd go and do something else less boring instead. Maybe. I'm not sure if that's meant. Is that Welsh? Dunclawal, if I'm pronouncing it right. Dunclawal. I'm not sure. Dunwal Mulmud, maybe. I'm sorry, mate. I'm getting your name wrong. But hello. Super Leads. Hello. And I've said hello to you. Roberto. Hello. Roberto Carlos. Yeah, free will versus determinism, definitely. The two shall fight, and the unstoppable force meets the immovable barrier. Free will versus determinism. Is that Rebecca? Rebecca, hello. Reblin Bradley. I'm trying to scroll down quickly so I'm not slowing it down too much. New being, I'm sure I said hello to you earlier. Hello again. And Brother John, hello. I know that's you in America, aren't you? Yeah. Welcome to pantheism. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, indeed. And Altered Edge Media, that's Jason. Hello. I know I saw some others in here earlier. I'm sure I saw Dino in here earlier.
Yeah, Dean's in, yeah.
Hello. And Guia, hello. And Cherries, yeah, hello.
Super lead.
So I'm being deliberately particular to make sure I get all the way down and don't miss anyone out. Dino, hello. Dino and James, hello. You're not lurking anymore. I see you appear in the chat room. Right, I think I've scrolled all the way down. Hopefully I've said hello to everyone. If I have missed you out, I'm sorry. I'm trying to not just get caught up on scrolling down the chat room, trying to see if everyone's in there. Yeah, anyway, thanks for giving us your attention, folks. Thanks for joining in the chat room. If you have, I think we've sort of ranted a fair bit about various things. Hopefully some of it will be useful to you, helpful, or at least encouraging and uplifting and empowering. Yeah, hopefully.
Yes.
If not, go and find something better to do. Obviously isn't for you. Maybe you should find something else to invest your energy in. But thank you for joining us for a couple of hours.
Thanks, Cookie, as always. Thank you.
Tuesday night, tomorrow night, Raconteur News will be on again. I think they've got a guest for tomorrow night. Wednesday night will be on Reality Chat channel. Saturday night, Steve will be on. And I think Krishna is on Friday and Saturdays. He's been on quite a few times over the last week, I think. So yeah, I'm sure he'll pop up again at some point. So thanks again. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to Days and Gary and Jason and Webby, even though they didn't say anything in the end. But thanks for joining in anyway, guys. Hopefully catch you next time. I'm going to click the button. Good night, folks. Losing my voice again. Croak.